Hello, hope everybody's doing good today. It's a rainy day here in Stoneville, so I thought I'd read you another book. This book is called Pocahontas. I know you're very familiar with Pocahontas, but this is actually a true story, and so let's hear what these authors have to say. This was written by Ingrid and Edward Perrin Dulaire, and there's Pocahontas. Another picture. There's pretty pictures in this book. And this is the foreword, which is at the very beginning of the book before the story actually starts. In the year 1607, the first Englishmen came sailing across the ocean to settle the part of the New World, which they called Virginia after their Virgin Queen Elizabeth. They might have all perished if it had not been for the help they got from the Indian princess Pocahontas. This is her story. In the dark woods of Virginia, where dusky owls hooted over the treetops and prowling bees howled at the moon, there lived a stern old Indian chief. His name was Powhatan. He ruled over 30 tribes. He had a little daughter who was the very apple of his eye. She was as sweet and pretty as he was ugly and cruel. He gave her the finest feathers and the shiniest shells when he came home from the warpath, for he was so very fond of her. "Oh, that little one is sweet, but full of pranks, and only wants to play," said the squaws. They worked from morning till night, and their girls had to help them. But the mighty Powhatan's daughter was allowed to skip and dance. He gave her the name Pocahontas, which means the one who plays mostly. While the shadows were long and the woods around were black, Pocahontas slept snugly in her father's longhouse. But at the dawn of day, she jumped from her bed mat, ran out the door, and down to the bank of the river. Warm or cold, summer or winter, she took her morning bath every day, for that would make her healthy and strong. When the sun rose, she stood on the bank and beamed toward the sun and sang a small song in its honor. Round and red the sun beamed back. With a splash, she jumped into the water. After her swim, she tied a deerskin around her waist and some beads around her neck. Now Pocahontas could run and play with the boys, but the other girls must go home to help the squaws cook and garden. Pocahontas ran and frolicked in the woods and fair meadows. She grew strong and straight and supple as a cat, and could find her way in the deepest forests. There she gathered berries and herbs and brought them to her grandmother's hut. Grandmother was so old and frail that she sat in the smoke by her fire and shivered and froze. But there was no end to all that she knew. She made healing drinks and ointments from the berries and herbs that Pocahontas brought. She made pots of clay and mats of sweet-smelling grass. With sharp flints, she cut clothes from deerskin. While she worked, she talked and mumbled. She was full of stories and magic. She told Pocahontas about the great spirit the Indians worshipped and about the other spirits that lived in the sun, in trees, and rocks, and even in animals. Some of the spirits were good. They watched over the Indians. Pocahontas must never forget to praise the good spirits. But there are other spirits that were mischievous and even wicked. Gentle words might keep them from doing harm. Or it was much that grandmother knew. In all the world, there was only one who knew still more about spirits and magic than grandmother, thought Pocahontas. That was Powhatan's medicine man. He knew secret magic ways to find answers to every question. Then one day, white men came to Powhatan's land. There, like the Indians had never seen. On huge boats, they were blown straight in from the great waters. From their boats roared the voice of thunder itself. At once they began to build a village in Powhatan's land. They chopped down his trees, they hunted his game, and acted as though they owned his land. They were not afraid of offending the great Powhatan, even though he was so mighty that everyone trembled when he frowned. They must be dangerous sorcerers, Powhatan's people thought. It wasn't only that they did not look like regular people with their pale faces and their hair like corn silk, but in their hands they carried magic sticks that spat fire which killed whatever it hit. Yes, they were so dangerous and full of sorcery that even Powhatan did not go against them quickly with all his braves to chase them out of his land. His medicine man sat at his side and juggled and conjured to find out what kind of magic the pale faces practiced, but he could not make it out. All that summer the Indians worried and wondered, and the children cried and went into hiding when anyone said paleface. One day Pocahontas sat in the garden, playing with a doll she had made of a corn cob. Suddenly she laughed right out loud. The palefaces looked just like her corn cob doll. Then she was certain their magic could not be evil, for corn was the Indians' best friend. Do you see her corn cob doll? When fall came, the Indians captured one of the white leaders. He had ventured too far away from the white men's village, and a band of Indian warriors caught him in a swamp. They dragged him through the woods to Powhatan's village so the mighty chief himself could decide what should be done with him. Powhatan called his medicine men, and the medicine men called his helpers. They painted their faces in the most awesome manner with green and red and black paint, and the medicine man adorned his head with stuffed snakes and weasels. When the prisoner was brought into the village, the children yelled, but Pocahontas was not the least bit afraid. She thought he was the handsomest man she had ever seen. His eyes were strange and blue as the sky, but she could see no evil in them. She painted her face a glowing red and hurried into her ceremonial robe of white turkey feathers so she could take her place beside her father when he judged the prisoner. He was an English captain, and his name was John Smith. He was the hardiest and shrewdest of all the white men who had come to Powhatan's land.